What's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today I want to tell you the most underrated player on every single NBA team. This list is going to be subjective. Obviously, I don't see the same NBA coverage as you do, so the guys on this list for me are players that I feel like deserve more love, more attention for the great seasons they've been having, and I want to go ahead and talk about how great they've been. It's going to range from role players, young guys who I think have a ton of potential, to even maybe star-level players who I just don't think are getting enough appreciation for how good they've been so far this year. Let me know who you think the most underrated player is on your favorite team down below. As always, we're going to go in alphabetical order from Atlanta Hawks to Washington Wizards, and there will be timestamps so you can go ahead and find your favorite team. But for right now, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. Let's get into the list. Starting off with the Atlanta Hawks, I'm going with Bogdan Bogdanovic. While it hasn't been a very successful season for the team as a whole, Bogdan's been great, putting up 16.7 points per game, which is a career high, shooting 37% from deep, 2.8 dimes, 3.3 boards over a steal, and he's playing under 30 minutes per game, of course coming off the bench behind DeJounte and Trae Young. He's a flamethrower, one of the scariest microwave guys in the entire NBA. If he starts hitting threes, if he hits 1, 2, 3, you're in a lot of trouble because Bogdan can heat up in an instant, and all of a sudden the game can be put out of reach. He's a really special scorer. I hope if the Hawks go for a fire sale this offseason, they consider moving him somewhere where he can actually win, because I believe that if you put Bogdan on a high-level team or maybe even a championship contender, I think he can elevate them to the next level. For the Boston Celtics, I went ahead and took Jaylen Brown. He is absolutely one of the most underappreciated all-stars that we have in the league at the moment. He's made a number of those games, made All-NBA last year, and this season has let himself take a bit of a step back to make the whole thing work and allow the Celtics to be on pace for one of the best seasons in franchise history. Someone was going to have to sacrifice to make KP and Drew Holiday work, and that guy has been Jaylen Brown, yet he's still giving them a fantastic season. 22.5 points per game, over 50% shooting from the field. His three-point percentage is back up above 35%, still rebounding well, still playmaking a bit, getting some steals, playing high-level defense. Jaylen Brown is a perfect complementary all-star. He doesn't need to pop that much to make this team work, but at the same time, he's a key cog in everything they do, and I still feel like the only time people ever talk about him is when they're trying to clown him, but I feel like he's in for a great playoff run this year, a little bit of a revenge run, and people are going to realize how great Jaylen Brown truly is. For the Brooklyn Nets, I'm going to go with Lonnie Walker IV. Amongst all the chaos that Brooklyn has had so far this season with the coaching change and the lack of overall direction, Lonnie's been great. They picked him up on a minimum contract this past offseason, and I have a feeling he's going to get a good bit more than that this upcoming offseason. He's averaging right around what he averaged last year with 11 points per game, but he's doing it in significantly less minutes, less than 18 minutes per game, shooting 42% from deep, 2.1 boards, 1.4 assists. Lonnie's been great as a scorer off the bench. Again, I don't know if he's going to be in Brooklyn next season. I imagine somebody will pay him, and he's been very deserving of it. I feel like he's carved out a pretty good role for himself in the league as a high-level bench scorer, and I hope Lonnie Walker gets a place to stay for a little while and excel in that role. For the Charlotte Hornets, I went ahead and picked Mark Williams. He unfortunately hasn't played that much this season. I think he's played only around 20 games, been dealing with injury, but when he was on the court, he was amazing. He's a really solid rim protector, has a lot of athleticism. He and LaMelo Ball were popping in terms of their chemistry, and they built up a lot of it in very limited time playing together. It's just a matter of, can he actually stay on the court for a majority of a season, because in the first 2 years, it's been a pretty big problem. Hopefully he's able to come back here soon. I don't remember what his injury timetable is, but I think he's a really important part of the Hornets' future. Part of the reason I made this pick is that I'm just a big believer in his game. And the Hornets, I think, have a really fun young core building over there between Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, maybe even Trey Mann is part of that. He's kind of popped since coming over at the deadline. I think Mark Williams as the anchor down low is an underappreciated aspect of this team's future. For the Chicago Bulls, I'm going with Ayo Dosunmu. Another team on this list that's been pretty disappointing this year, but Ayo has been fantastic. His first season, he was really good as a rookie. He stepped up in the light of a bunch of injuries and was a big reason why the Bulls were pretty successful. Last year, took a big step back. It was not at all the sophomore season that I was hoping for from Ayo, but this year, he's definitely gotten it back on track, giving them 11 points per game, 2.7 boards, and 2.7 assists. The efficiency is way up, back towards the level we saw in his rookie season, where he's shooting around 50% from the field and 40.6% from deep. Kobe White's been the guard getting a lot of attention, and that's very deserved. Kobe White has been fantastic, but we need to talk more about what Ayo has done so far, and again, looking like a piece of this team's future going forward. For the Cleveland Cavaliers, I'm going to go with Isaac Okoro. For the past couple years, a lot of the Cavs rotation spots have been locked down. It's been Garland, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen. The question is, who's going to be that three going forward? And when they picked him in the top 10 a few years ago, the Cavs were hoping it would be Isaac Okoro, but he's been very up and down over the course of his career. However, this season, it feels like he's really locked into this role. He's giving them over 50% from the field, 40% from deep, and playing high-level defense. He's not giving them the most points per game. He's not the most flashy player who's going to pop on the stat sheet, but Isaac Okoro is so fantastic in his role. And he's been a super underrated reason as to why the Cavs have been so good this year, despite a bunch of injuries. It's been amazing to see him finally kind of find his footing as that 3D wing they've been looking for, and if he keeps developing like this, Isaac Okoro is going to be really good in the league for a really long time. For the Dallas Mavericks, I think the easy pick here is Dante Exum. If I told a lot of casual fans that Dante Exum was back in the league, they would be shocked because he went from a top 10 pick to playing overseas the past couple of years to now being an integral part to this Dallas Mavericks rotation, a team that's trying to go ahead and make a late season playoff push. He's shooting incredibly well from three, 47.8% on limited attempts, but even still, knocking down that much when he struggled the entirety of his NBA career before is really impressive. Been efficient from the field, 56.2%. He's done a good job playmaking, played some solid defense. I thought Dante Exum was an interesting addition in the offseason, but I didn't expect him to be this good. He's been fantastic, and we need to talk more about how amazing it is, how he turned his career around, again, going from seemingly a bust as a top 10 pick to now a really solid role player over there in Dallas. For the Denver Nuggets, I'm going to go ahead and pick Peyton Watson. This is a team that's pretty reliant on their starting five, which makes sense. It's one of the best starting fives in the league, but the bench has been a little bit shaky so far this season. They lost some depth going into their playoff run last year, and they've needed guys to step up, and one of the players who's done exactly that has been Peyton Watson, giving them right around 7 points per game, shooting 34% from deep, but mostly playing some really high-level defense. Some of the best defense on this team comes from Peyton Watson. He's really lengthy, athletic, he's pretty quick on his feet, he's the ability to guard a number of positions, switch onto a number of guys, and hold his own. And he's doing all this at 21 years old after last season, not getting a lot of run. They're asking a lot of him to step up on the bench so far this season, and especially going into the playoffs, they're going to need him to play some really high-level defensive minutes, and so far he's done exactly that for them. I've been excited by what I've seen. I think it's only a matter of time before Peyton Watson becomes an amazing player for this team, and already he's been really good in this role. For the Detroit Pistons, I'm going to go with Cade Cunningham. It may be weird to some people to pick a number one overall pick at this spot, but truly, if they didn't have Cade Cunningham, I think the Pistons would have like 3 wins on the entire season. He's been really good for them so far this year, in spite of a terrible supporting cast, a front office who does not support him and give him players to help him succeed, and a coach in Monty Williams who more times than not feels like he's actively sabotaging the team with some of his rotations and just overall coaching decisions. Cade has done wonders despite all of this going on. I still think he's going to be a phenomenal perennial all-star in this league. It's just a matter of time before they get him some help, and in spite of all the chaos, Cade has still been having a really good year so far. For the Golden State Warriors, I'm going to go ahead and pick Brandon Podziemski. In the midst of a season where he probably wasn't supposed to play that much, being drafted in the 20s, Pods has stepped up in a big way, especially with the absence to Chris Paul. They needed some extra guard play. They needed somebody who could be a creator on that end, and Pods has done that, giving them right around 4 dimes, 6 boards, and 10 points per game, shooting 36.6% from deep. One of the best charge takers in the NBA already. Pods has been special as a rookie. Again, I don't know how many people actually thought he was going to play big minutes for the Warriors, but he's made himself indispensable for this team both now and definitely going forward towards the future. He's going to be one of the next stars of this Golden State Warriors franchise. For the Houston Rockets, my pick is Jabari Smith Jr. His numbers haven't taken this massive leap from last season till now, specifically because they added Fred VanVleet and Dillon Brooks in the offseason, but his overall impact is worlds better than what it was last season. He's given them 13.4 points per game, shooting way better from the field, knocking down threes at a pretty solid clip, 35.4%, and he's rebounding the heck out of the ball. He's had double-digit rebounds in 4 out of his past 5 games, including a game against the Thunder, where he had 17, a game against Phoenix, where he had 16. He's also a really high-level defender. On this Houston Rockets team, I have some questions about how certain guys are going to fit into roles down the line, but one guy I know for sure is going to be an impactful and high-level player in any scenario, any role that you put him in, is Jabari Smith Jr. He's already got that Swiss Army knife feel to him. I think he's going to be one of the best players in this Houston team for a really long time, even if his game isn't as flashy as some of the other great young players in the NBA. For the Indiana Pacers, I'm going with Aaron Nesmith. When the Celtics drafted him a few years ago, he was supposed to be this knockdown shooter right out of college, a guy who could play a role from day one, and it never really came to fruition over in Boston, but since he got to Indiana coming over in the Brogdon trade, he's been way better. He's found a role that suits him, and this season in particular, he's been one of the best role players on this entire team, giving them 12.4 points per game, over 50% from the field, 44.7% from deep, 4 boards, a dime and a half, and he's been really solid on that defensive end too. Indiana doesn't have a lot of strong defenders, but one guy they can rely on, especially going up against these bigger wing players that they struggle with, is Aaron Nesmith. I've loved his game over here in Indiana this season, and he's quickly become one of my favorite role players in the league, and I'm really excited to see what he can do in Indiana long term. For the Los Angeles Clippers, I'm going to go with Amir Coffey. A lot of the attention for that team goes to James Harden and Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, and for really good reason, also like Norman Powell, Russell Westbrook, but Amir Coffey's been a great role player linchpin for them all year. Specifically as a three-point shooter, he is shooting 41.7% from the outside on about 2 attempts per game. It's nothing too crazy, but being able to stand out there and knock down those open looks that those stars generate is big. He's played some solid defensive minutes as well, been one of the higher minute per game role players on this team. For a squad that needs guys to step up in that bench unit and even sometimes start, he started 9 games for them, Amir Coffey is a pretty reliable guy that they can go to, and an underrated aspect as to why their whole thing works. For the Los Angeles Lakers, I'm going to go with D'Angelo Russell. There are a number of ways I could have went here, but I just wanted to show D'Lo some love. What he's done all season, especially in the face of constant trade rumors that persist even now. There still is conversations that in the offseason, the Lakers want to pursue a star, and theoretically, D'Lo's contract wouldn't make sense to move in that deal. But regardless of all that noise, D'Lo's just kept his head down and has been hooping. Leading up to the deadline, he was playing some of the best basketball of his career, and now leaving it, he's been great too. I know last night he torched my Oklahoma City Thunder in impressive fashion. He was drilling the most contested threes possible. He's been great as an outside shooter, shooting over 41% from deep. He's been solid as a playmaker, just giving the Lakers a lot of fantastic minutes. I've been really impressed with him, and I do hope that eventually he's able to find a landing spot, even if it's not in LA. D'Lo is just a good player that deserves to have a home for more than like a season at a time. For the Memphis Grizzlies, I went ahead with Vince Williams. It was between him and Gigi Jackson, but I feel like Gigi has gotten a bit more attention in the national spotlight, specifically with that big game on TNT where he got the Shaq interview afterwards, while meanwhile Vince Williams hasn't quite gotten that notoriety, and he's been really good as well, giving the Grizzlies about 10 points per game, 37% from deep, 5.6 boards, 3.2 dimes, playing some solid defense. He's been a ball handler, he's been a secondary guy, had some big-time scoring explosions. Vince Williams is really fun and ultimately is developing rapidly into a piece that I think will continue to be a mainstay of the Grizzlies rotation next season. That's part of the ultimate maybe benefit of this injury-riddled year for Memphis, where coming into the season, one of the big issues for them is who plays some of the wing minutes now that Dillon Brooks is gone. Do you go kind of small with Marcus Smart or Desmond Bane there? Who plays in those minutes off the bench? Is it Zaire Williams or a number of these other guys? And now they've got a chance to see guys like Vince Williams as well as Gigi Jackson blossom, and they feel like they could be staples of the rotation next year, potentially making the Grizzlies deeper than ever. For the Miami Heat, I'm going to go with Duncan Robinson. I feel like over the past calendar year or so, he has just rapidly revolutionized his game. It went from at the beginning of his career where he's just this knockdown shooter that pops onto the scene and suddenly gets this big contract, and then last season his minutes got cut a ton and he just really didn't feel like the same player as he typically was. But then in the playoffs, they gave him more of a role, they let him do a little bit more ball handling, he did some playmaking, and suddenly Duncan Robinson had evolved into a completely new player. And this season he's combined those things, giving them 13.3 points per game, shooting over 40% from deep, and a career high 3 assists per game, playing better defense than he did in the past. Duncan has been integral to this team's success so far this season, and it's been great to just watch him evolve from a spot-up shooter to a guy who's rapidly more and more involved in the offense, and for very good reason. For the Milwaukee Bucks, I'm going to go with Giannis Antetokounmpo. It might be crazy to say that a top 5 player in the world is underrated, someone who's in the MVP race, but I truly do think he is by a lot of NBA fans. I feel like a lot of people think he just runs and dunks, doesn't have any skill whatsoever, and I made a full video talking about this yesterday, so if you want to hear some more in-depth thoughts, you can go check that out. But he's currently having one of the most efficient and dominant seasons we've ever seen, and nobody's talking about it. I feel like nobody realizes how good Giannis has been with all the chaos that's enthralled the Bucks this entire season. They shouldn't have the record that they do, but they do for the most part because of how good Giannis has been, the best he's ever been, and I really hope he goes on a revenge run in the playoffs this year and reminds people that he is as good as he is. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, I'm going with Naz Reid. When we talk about the best bench players in the entire world, Naz Reid belongs firmly in that conversation. He plays just 23 minutes per game because he's in the same big man rotation as Rudy Gobert and Cat, but in those minutes, he is phenomenal pretty consistently, gives them 12.3 points per game, 48.2% from the field, 41% from deep, right around 5 boards, over an assist per game. He can handle the ball like crazy for a big man. Every Naz Reid minute is an experience. I really like him here in Minnesota, but I do hope eventually someday he gets a bigger role on some other team, or maybe it does end up happening in Minnesota, but eventually I just want to see Naz Reid unleashed because I think he could put up some ridiculous numbers with more of an opportunity. For the New Orleans Pelicans, I'm going with Herb Jones. When we talk about the best perimeter defenders in the world, Herb Jones belongs in that conversation. What he does on a night-to-night basis against some of the best scorers in the league is fantastic. The past couple games, he's guarded Tyrese Haliburton and done a phenomenal job. I know there's been a number of times where he's played some of the best defense out of anybody I've ever seen on Shai. Herb is special. Not only that, but he's turned himself into a knockdown three-point shooter. He went from shooting 33% last season to 43% this year, about a 10% jump, still playing the same high-level defense. He's been more involved in the offense. Herb is special. He's only 25 years old too, so there's room for him to grow, moving beyond this season, which is just his third. Herb is so important to everything New Orleans does, and truly one of the most underrated role players in the entire league, if you ask me. For the New York Knicks, I'm going with Dante DiVincenzo. He was their big pickup in the offseason, adding another Villanova player to the team, and he's been asked to do way more than I think anybody was expecting this season, mainly because they've been decimated by injuries. There have been a lot of nights recently where they said, hey, Dante, we need you to be the one option out there, and credit to him, he's flourished in those moments. On the season as a whole, he's easily putting up a career high in points, still shooting over 40% from deep, 45% from the field, diming up a little bit here and there, playing some high-level defense. Dante is a fantastic piece. He can clearly step up when they need him to, and I think even more so once they get their stars back, he's the perfect complementary wing for this team. He was just an amazing addition in the offseason. For the Oklahoma City Thunder, I'm going with Aaron Wiggins. He doesn't play a lot of minutes per game, just 14.5, but every minute that he plays, he's incredibly impactful. Whether he's knocking down threes at a 50% clip, that's not an exaggeration. He's shooting 50.5% from deep. Every time he shoots it, I feel certain it's going down. He rebounds really well, which is something that we need. His cutting is some of the best out of any role player I've seen. Every time the Thunder need to open up some type of space, or one of Shai or Giddey or someone else gets caught, it feels like Aaron Wiggins just makes the perfect timely cut at the exact moment when he needs to. He's just such a good role player. Also plays some really solid defense, rarely makes mistakes. I love the minutes that Aaron Wiggins gives this team, and honestly, I wish he would get even more minutes than he already does. For the Orlando Magic, I'm going to go with Jalen Suggs. The first couple seasons of his career were a little bit disappointing because he couldn't stay on the court, and even when he could, the offense was really rough, and while the defense showed a bunch of flashes, it wasn't enough to make up for the utter lack of scoring. So, coming into this season with a loaded guard rotation, it was the time for the Magic to figure out who should stay and who should go, and Jalen Suggs has made himself an invaluable part of this guard rotation going forward, and a lot of nights been the Magic's third best player. The shooting has popped. He's gone from a 32.7% shooter last year to nearly a 40% three-point shooter this season. He's given them 12.3 points per game, 46% from the field, and the defense is all defensive level. I strongly believe he should be on one of those all defensive teams. One of the biggest reasons why the Magic are as good as they are on that end is the play of Jalen Suggs. He's become so good for this team. He's just 22 years old, so much potential still, and it's great to see him very quickly beat the bust allegations and make himself a core piece of the Magic going forward. For the Philadelphia 76ers, I'm going to go with Ricky Council IV. This is a name that a lot of you may have never even heard before if you're not paying attention to the Sixers, but he's been really fun when he's gotten minutes. He's an undrafted rookie that stepped up in the absence of some of their other guys due to injuries, and like I said, when he gets minutes, he produces. Against the Celtics in 19 minutes, had 16 points on near perfect shooting. Against the Miami Heat not too long ago, had 13 points on 5 of 10 shooting, and against the Wizards on February 10th, had 19 points and 10 boards, giving himself a double-double. He's a 6'6 guard with some ridiculous explosive athleticism, and a guy that even when the Sixers get healthy, I feel like could be part of the rotation in some spot minutes and give them some really good run. For the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to go with Grayson Allen. He's been one of the very few consistent forces for this team beyond Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker when they've been on the court, and he's been even more than that. He's shooting 46.3% from three, which is the best three-point percentage in the entire league, giving them 12.6 points per game, a few boards, a few dimes, playing some solid defense, being a great connector overall. He's the perfect fit in that starting lineup alongside their three stars, and just someone that they can consistently rely on. A big-time pickup, bringing him over from that Damian Lillard trade that they got involved with, sending out DeAndre Ayton, and I feel like like Grayson Allen has probably found a home here in Phoenix for a while because he's indispensable to what they do at this point. For the Portland Trailblazers, I'm going with Dwop Reith. He's been one of my favorite stories of this entire season. He is a 27-year-old rookie who worked really hard to get up to this point, finally get his NBA opportunity, and he's thrived here in Portland. They've had a pretty thin big man rotation this season, mainly because of the Robert Williams injury, and he's stepped into the fold and been a phenomenal fit. He's given them 9.3 points per game, 4 boards, 1.1 dimes, and shooting 37.6% from deep as a 6'11 guy, and he's top 10 in threes made by a rookie this season. He very well could end up on an all-rookie team in what is a pretty stacked draft class. I've loved what I've seen from Dwop Reith. I really hope he continues to get opportunities for Portland moving forward. And again, he's been just one of my favorite stories in the league so far. For the Sacramento Kings, I'm going to go with Domantas Sabonis, who I feel like is one of the most underappreciated star players in the entire league. This season, he has over 20 triple-doubles, a ridiculous amount of double-doubles, 19.9 points per game, leading the league in rebounds per game with 13.4, 8.4 dimes, just a general offensive hub, a rebounding machine, a crazy interior presence. He's even shooting over 41% from deep. It is only on 1 attempt per game, but even still, that's incredibly impressive. I love what I've seen from Domantas Sabonis this season. I think this is probably the best he's ever been, and the fact that he wasn't an all-star is ridiculous. For the San Antonio Spurs, I'm going to go with Devin Vassell. Victor Wembanyama, of course, is getting a majority of the attention for the Spurs, which makes a lot of sense, but Devin Vassell has been fantastic in his own right. Career high 19.3 points per game, shooting 37.4% from deep, 46.8% from the field, which is easily a career high as well. He's evolved as a playmaker, as an overall scorer, grabbing 1.1 steals per game. Vassell's been fantastic. When we want to talk about co-stars for Wemby, Vassell is slowly turning into that mold of player. I don't know if he's ever going to be the all-star co-star that Wemby needs to win a championship, but I think he's going to be a really good player for a really long time on the Spurs. And if you got a couple of all-star nods at some point, I wouldn't be surprised at all. For the Toronto Raptors, I'm going to go with Grady Dick. At the beginning of his rookie campaign, it was a bit of a struggle. He really wasn't finding his footing. He was supposed to be this knockdown shooter and just couldn't get the 3-ball to fall. So eventually he got sent down to the G League, didn't play a lot with the Raptors. But now that they've headed into this rebuilding era, they've given him new chances, more opportunities, and he's been thriving in those minutes. For example, over the past 5 games that he's played, he's knocking down 58% of his shots, 52% of his threes, and giving them 13.2 points per game in 23 minutes. I think Grady's going to be a perfect fit for this team going forward. He's an ideal type of player to have next to Scotty Barnes and anybody else they add to this rotation. And it's just cool to see him thriving after, for no reason, there were some people saying that he was a bust after like 10 games of his NBA career. For the Utah Jazz, I'm going to go with Colin Sexton. With Lauri Markkanen's emergence last year, Sexton kind of got moved to the background as one of the pieces of that Donovan Mitchell trade return, but this season he has emerged into a core piece in his own right, putting up 18.1 points per game, 4.7 dimes, 2.5 boards, shooting 48.7% from the field and 40.2% from deep. He's given them some solid defense, had some amazing clutch moments. Sexton's just been fantastic. Feels like he can be a guard of the future for them, and it's just cool to see him find a role over here in Utah after injuries really derailed the end of his Cleveland stint. And finally, for the Washington Wizards, I've got Deni Avdija. If we want to talk about players that have raised their stock on this Wizards team this season, Deni is easily towards the forefront of that conversation, averaging a career high in points per game, easily a career high in three-point percentage, field goal percentage is above 50%. Deni has been looking better and better as time has gone on too, playing better defense, and recently even had a 43-point explosion against the Pelicans, which was easily his career high, knocking down 6 threes in the process. It feels like he's going to be a great versatile wing for the Wizards for years to come, and as they're trying to figure out this rebuild to figure out who's the core piece, Deni has emerged as easily one of those main guys. With all that being said, that's my pick for the most underrated player on every single NBA team. Let me know down below in the comments, like I mentioned earlier, who your pick would be for your favorite team. Did I get my pick right or wrong? And let me know why. Also, like I said earlier, leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. It helps the channel out a ton. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say it back.